welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm extremely excited to be here.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you, and honestly, can't believe we've not had you on already.
A lot of people have said to me, "Oh, I didn't think you went out in public and did public things." And I'm like, I must come across as a little bit of a recluse, but I love talking to readers and bloggers and other authors. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's of course one of the reasons we like having the show is it gives us reason to talk to folks outside of like GRL or something.
Yes. And I like going to GRL anytime I can afford it. I think maybe that's what it is. I just can't afford to go out in public.
Yeah, sometimes the budget can like force you into reclusiveness.
Yes. Or they can dress her up, but they can't take her out.
Let's dive into some of your origin story. You've been writing an romance for a while now, and I love what you've got in your bio that says, you know, as a child, you were much more into Ken and G.I. Joe as a couple than Ken and Barbie.
Absolutely.
So where did all this start for you to tell these kinds of stories?
It is pretty funny, and I was reading the Hockey Player's Heart, and I saw that mention of the dolls, and I thought that was so funny. I was thinking about that when I saw that in your book about the hockey player's his model.
He's got his action figure,
and Aaron's calling it a doll, and Caleb's like, no, it's a replica.
Yeah,
1/6.
Exactly.
But it's so funny because I can remember distinctly being in Mrs. DeBerry's art class, and we were all working at this one long table, and I think I was in second or third grade, and one of the boys across the table from me asked me if I had heard of two men getting married, because there was a court case going on in Minnesota, apparently. I looked it up as an adult, and these two men were trying to marry, and they were suing for sexual equality, because why couldn't he be allowed to marry a man? And you know, and this boy was like, he was just bursting with this news. And all I could think of was, well, which one wears the dress? Because to me, the only reason you would get married is because you could get dressed up in fluffy, frilly clothes. I'm like, why would anybody else get married? And he's like, no, they wear suits. Because I having looked at the media, you could see pictures of them. And he's like, no, they wear suits. And I said, okay. And he said, but they kiss. And I remember that moment and go, I like that. That sounds right. That's right to me. And I probably should have known that I was gay back then, but I didn't, because I went through the whole "but I'm a cheerleader" thing, even though I was never a cheerleader, because I had the long hair and I liked fluffy, frilly skirts and that kind of a thing. And it just didn't occur to me, because the only people I knew who were gay or women who were gay were not feminine at all. So I thought that's how it rolled. It was, it was 1970s. I'm very old. But when I also distinctly remember playing Barbies at Peggy's house, and I was like, well, I think these two should be in the bed together. That's how it should work. And I just know that I was never, ever invited back to Peggy's house to play Barbies. And it was so sad, because her mom, for an after-school snack, served graham crackers with chocolate frosting on them. And I was forever denied that for my love of Ken and G.I. Joe in the Barbie house together.
It's interesting, as I read this thing about you and the G.I. Joe, because remembering back to the G.I. Joe that I had, it was in the era that G.I. Joe was pretty rugged and had the beard, a very, very Brillo-y kind of beard on the action figure. And I was thinking of that juxtaposed against, very clean cut Ken. And it's like, yeah, I
Yes.
can see that.
Yes. I thought they made a good pair. And Ken and I don't know, was it Chip? I think it was Chip was the other male for the not for the girls who were not Barbie. Was he Chip or Skip or something like that? But I always thought that boys should be with boys and girls should be with girls, and it just made sense that way. I couldn't see why other people couldn't see it like that.
And quite the progressive conversation to have in third grade, too.
Yes. I remember getting into an argument with my grandmother, and I was in my early, I think I was about 12 when Anita Bryant was doing her thing, and she was talking about homosexuals teaching, and I just could never see what was wrong with it. It just didn't make for people to be offended by it didn't make any sense to me. I mean, yes, I feel like I grew up in a fairly liberal household, and but it's not like I wasn't exposed to sexism or racism or eventually homophobia, including my own internalized, but it just, 2 boys, 2 girls. That's how it should work.
Mm-hmm. And here we are all these years later, and it's come to pass that we could all get married and stuff.
Yes, it is. It's very exciting. And even after that, I found myself drawn to anything where there was a hint, especially that 2 male characters might kiss. I was, even very, very young, I was always looking for that in a story or wanting that to happen, or slashing characters in my head even before I knew what slashing was. And it's funny to me that I didn't realize that this was where my voice would be happiest until now. There was a science fiction series. I meant to look it up. The author's name was Mel. This is why I would be terrible on Jeopardy. I can never remember anyone's last name. But the author's name was Mel, and he or she wrote these 2 or 3 novels about these guys who ended up bonded through an empath bond, and they became this really great team of interstellar gang and drug ring busters. And it was a great series. I loved it, and it was one of the first things I found that had enough romance in it for me, because I would always go over to the even after I came out, I would go into gay bookstores, and I'm like, yeah, there's the lesbian coming out stories. One more coming out story. I'm like, can I just read about people who are already out? And I would go over to the men's side, but they were all mysteries or science fiction, and I had to take the mystery or science fiction to get my romance fix. Mm-hmm. And then when I wrote a story that I'd always wanted to write, Regency romance, and I sent it away for I think it was Cleus Press was doing a Best Gay Erotica or something like that, and I sent it away for that. And in the meantime, I joined RWA, and I was trying to get heterosexual romance published. And one of my critique partners said, they're buying gay male romance now. I'm like, they are? I could totally do that. And next thing I knew, I had a story submission into Samhain, and they bought it. So,
which book was that?
That was Custom Ride. It was a short story, and I wrote it in 2 weeks.
What got you into writing in general?
Oh, when I found out, I remember when if you could just go back and record all of these bizarre epiphanies I had when I was in single digits, I wish I'd known everything that I was going to do. At the age of 6, though, I found out that what an author did was make books. And I always loved to read. So I thought making books was about the best job ever, especially even as I got a little bit older, and I thought, oh, I'll be in a cabin out in the woods typing away, not having to deal with people. I like this job. So, but my parents being very practical individuals, whenever I would announce my career intention as authoress, because I was very into gendered suffixes, my parents would say to me, "And what else, dear? And what else, dear?" Because they knew it was not a good way to make a living. So they made sure that I had my certification as a teacher, and I did that for a very long time as my main source of income while trying to finish books and then trying to sell them. But I wanted to do this from forever, and the fact that I get to do it and that there are books out there and complete strangers read them and then say something to me about them is just the most amazing thing ever.
It really is the best thing, or at least one of the best things to get to do, for sure.
Yes, it really is. I get to play with my imaginary friends. That's what my job is. I love it.
When you were doing Custom Ride and kind of preparing to shift into this genre, were you reading anything in the genre yet, or?
I was reading fan fiction, and like I said, I remember that series. I read a few gay mysteries. After I sold Custom Ride, I went out and got recommendations. I read Allie Blue, and I read Josh Lanyon, and I read I also really liked Kiera Andrews way back. I mean, I still like her work, but I remember she was one of the first people I read. And now I read mostly, when I read gay romance, I read mostly historical or paranormal, because I find it does less to interfere with my story brain to stay out of contemporary. So only when I'm like taking a bigger break, like a couple of weeks, do I read a lot of gay romance contemporary.
That makes sense, because you got to keep your writing brain in going down the right path and not getting too influenced.
Right. I don't want to suddenly be halfway through a book and go, "Oh, that was a much better idea. I need to do it like that."
What would you say are the trademark elements of your books?
What I want readers to get is, I want readers to have people who feel real to them. I want them to imagine that they could actually talk to these people if they found them, that they would either want to punch them or want to hug them. I would like readers to take away usually a laugh or two from the stories. I want readers to remember the characters more than the story. I just want them to take away a feeling for who the people are. And definitely I would like readers to find them hot. So I would say hot and good characterization.
It's hard to go wrong with hot and good characterization combined together.
Yes. Hot, good characterization. And of course, KA always does a happy ending. No angsty cliffhanger for me.
Do you look for similar in the romances that you read to stay away from the angsty cliffhanger, or?
Oh, definitely. I need to know if I'm getting into something that's going to be a series. I like to know that ahead of time. And I can wait through several books as long as I know that everybody's not going to die at the end. Because that would really make me unhappy. But I definitely, and we all find authors who we know are going to deliver the kind of story we want to read. I love an author who can make me really doubt that he or she is going to be able to pull the romance back together, that there's just no way. It's just become too messed up and there's no way to fix this. And then I'm always amazed when the author makes it work and makes me believe in it. And those are people who I trust, and I will just run out and give them my money. I don't even have to read the blurb.
Do you want to give us an idea on who some of your one clicks like that are?
My one click right now, who I just always buy, is KJ Charles. I'm just in awe of her work. Absolutely in awe. I can't. I read it. I'm just like, yeah, I'm not going to write anything today because it'll never measure up to that. Thank goodness she writes historical, or I'd really be suffering. I like Jordan Castillo Price. I like Jordan Hawk. I loved reading L.B. Gregg, but I don't think she's written anything in a while because she just made me laugh so hard. I like Heidi Cullinan's work. I'm looking forward to her new series. She's one of the contemporary authors that I do read, but I definitely have to take a break before I read them from my own stuff.
Let's talk about your big series, Bad in Baltimore. It's a 6-book series currently as we record this. Mm-hmm. For those who aren't familiar with it, what's it all about?
Well, it like most of the time when I write a series, it wasn't supposed to be a series. I had this idea for this very tropey story. I had the idea of the kind of classic category romance of a kind of a marriage of convenience and bad blood between the families, and a father who is kind of forcing his son into this arranged marriage situation. And I wanted to set it, and I knew I was going to use a background of a soda company, and I wanted a East Coast city because that's where I'm from, and I feel like I can write the East Coast better. I wanted a city on the East Coast large enough to have a good-sized gay community and that could support a bottling industry. And one of my readers said, "How about Baltimore?" And I said, "I like Baltimore. I could do Baltimore." And so now I love it because I get to go down there and wander around and do research and write it off. But so I set the book in Baltimore, and when Eli bounced in as Nate's ex-boyfriend and friend, I knew he was going to have his own book. And then Quinn needed someone to talk to, and then there was Jamie, and he was going to need his own. That's how that whole series has been. And the last story, Bad Habit, was because I couldn't let go of Beach and Ty, the characters in Bad Behavior. I needed to see them a little bit farther. And I was walking around at a car show and imagining my imaginary friends there with me. And then the opening scene in Bad Habit just popped into my head, and then there were more Baltimore characters. And while I was working on that, one of the characters from Bad Attitude came and started talking to me. I'm like, I don't know if you can have a happy ending. You're kind of a jerk. So we'll have to see. But I did a lot of research for that. It's going to be tricky. So usually I don't plan much, but this one I'm planning a bit more because I need to figure out if I can make him redeemable. And it's not Peter. I've been telling some readers have been asking me, "You're not going to redeem Peter," which is Quinn's ex-boyfriend. And I said, "No, Peter is irredeemable. He's horrible. He's a cheater and a liar, and he is a very bad person." So no, it's not Peter.
Given that you hadn't perceived it as a series, do you just go from book to book and see if the next one clicks into place after that? Or do you see an end somewhere in sight? Or can you just keep populating Baltimore conceivably, for eternity?
I could. I do see that. I also would really like to write and I have it started, I want to write at least kind of like a look into the future for the first 3 couples with the other couples playing background. But it gets a little tricky when you bring in all of the couples and there are 10 people at the table and the 2 main characters who you're writing then don't know the 10 friends. So it can be a little tricky, and I always want to make them accessible for the reader. I don't want the reader to feel that they need list of characters at the front of the book so that they don't get confused. Like, I don't know if you ever read any of those fantasies where they had the whole long list of characters.
Yeah, like here's the entire family tree for
Yes.
everything.
Yes. I don't want readers to have to do that much work. That's my job to make it feel like they've known these people. It's not their job to keep track of things. So, sometimes some of the characters have to be left out of a scene because it's just getting big. But
Right.
I like coming back to visit them, and I hope that readers enjoy seeing their old friends. That's what it feels like when I get to hang out with them again, is like going to see people you haven't seen in a while, hanging out. Like GRL.
Exactly. It's like that one big reunion.
Mm-hmm.
How many more books do you see currently in Baltimore?
Well, I definitely have the next one. I don't know. I have another character whose story I would like to write if I could figure out who. I need to know a little bit more. I have a meet cute in mind for him, but I don't know much about the other hero, so he would have to talk to me a little bit. And a lot of people have asked me about a character named Marco, but he's really, really young. He's not at all ready for an HEA or even an HFN. He basically spends a lot of time opining that he needs his cherry popped. So I don't know what's gonna. I might write him a short story where he at least gets that much accomplished. But I I know I definitely want to try the character that I've been planning on, and then I'd like to do Nick, who appeared in Bad Behavior as Ty's mentor. So, and then I don't know, but I always have more stories. I have a, there's always, I'm sure you know, the plot bunnies, they just reproduce and reproduce, and I put them all in a folder. And if I can't not think about them, I'll write them a scene and see where that's going to go. But then if you start selling things on proposal, things are due, and
Yeah. Those deadlines can certainly wreak havoc with where your plot buddies want to go.
yes, because they and I when I teach writing, and my one of my workshops is on writer's block, and one of the things I talk about is the mistress and wife syndrome, because the book you're writing is like your wife, and you love it and you love her and you want to spend time with her, but there's that shiny new piece out there. And but the thing is, if you marry your mistress, she's just going to be another wife. So you got to stay with you got to love the one you're with before you go moving on to new greener territories. But yeah, those plot bunnies, they just, oh, look at that, that's so shiny out there.
Yeah,
It
right.
wouldn't be hard like the book I'm writing now.
You mentioned that the Baltimore series, you were looking at like category romances
Mm-hmm.
for these stories. What is it about category? Because category is such a special thing in its way because of kind of the formulas and the very tropiness of it all. What attracts you to that kind of story to tell?
I really like, I don't feel like the other ones were as trope inspired as Bad Company was, but I love, when I think about a story, one of the things I think about is what's the glue that's going to keep, because if they meet and they decide that they can't have this relationship, what's going to keep them from just going, you know what, I'm not going to, and wandering off to a big city like Baltimore, or even moving to another part of the country to get away from the guy you can't get out of your head. So those tropes act like the glue to stick them together. And I love how they can do that. And I love trying to deliver the familiar, but in a way that is new for the is new for the reader, and new for this telling of it. I I've written a lot of books that are second chance stories, or in the case of Bad Habit, even a third chance. But I always feel like it's different. So even if you write the same trope, opposites attract, second chance romance, if you're writing Secret Marriage or Secret Babies, you can write the same theme, but as long as you tell it in a fresh way with fresh characters, it's always going to be different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's infinite combinations for the tropes.
But I like that I'm like, oh, when I'm reading, I love a story where I'm like, oh, this is how it's going to go. I see, because I'm familiar with the trope and I read a lot of romances. And then the author uses it and kind of pulls the rug out from under me. I'm like, oh, that was clever. So I hope that sometimes when I'm playing with a trope, it's at least fresh for them when they're reading it. I'll whisper, because no one will hear me because I'm on a podcast. I'll whisper and say that I'm playing with amnesia for the 7th book in the Baltimore series. And I'm really excited about that because I love amnesia stories.
Okay, now you've mentioned amnesia and you said you've written a lot of second chances. Mm-hmm. What are some of your other very favorite tropes, either to write or to read?
I love the whole cut off from, like, snowed in, stuck in an elevator. I love reading things like that. I love an opposites attract. I love road trip stories. I've always wanted to write something with some kind of a chase in it, some kind of a road trip, running off kind of a thing. I love stories that redeem what seems like an alpha hole, as they call them in Romancelandia. I will pick those up. I love a taboo, a guardian ward kind of a relationship. That's like crack. I can't not read the blurb on one of those.
Is there a trope?
I always feel like I should be saying more to the question. I'm sorry. That was probably an edit that one out.
Is there a trope out there that you really want to take on as a writer that you haven't yet for some reason?
Definitely the amnesia. I've always wanted that, and I know what I like, the new spin I want to put on that. I really want to write a time travel book. And I just can never come up with a story, a world building that makes it work. To me, there has to be a reason for the time traveling. And anytime I come up with like a paranormal or extra world idea, it just feels so derivative to me. Whereas telling second chance romance stories for the 800th time doesn't feel derivative at all. And I don't know why that is, but if it feels like I'm copying someone else's ideas, I lose interest in it. 1, because it feels bad, and 2, because I've already read that story. Mm-hmm. Which is why I can't plan my stories out too far, because if I know how everything's going to work out, I can't write it because I already read it, and I'm writing it because I want to read it.
That's an interesting take on why you would pants more than you plot.
I've had a system now where I look at like turning points, and what often happens is what I think is going to be the black moment, what I think is going to be, oh my goodness, this is going to be such a big, important scene. That usually turns out to be only the halfway point instead of closer to the end. It's funny, and I find that is true in some of the authors that I read. I'm like, oh, this is the problem that she's not going to be able to solve. And then I get there and it's wrapped up in the first third of the book, and I'm very intrigued about how it's going to work from here on in. So I like knowing a couple of big scenes, and then just when I start a scene, I need to know what the emotion is behind it. Always like what are the feelings going in. And I can't write out of order because of the emotion. I mean, I can throw down some ideas, but I have to know. And that's why people always, I don't know how people can do insert sex scene here. Because if I could just insert sex scene here, then it doesn't belong in my story, because they have to be different people at the end of every scene than they were going into it. And I know people can just pull out scenes at random and write them and then make the story work, but that's not me. And I mean, I'm sure they write, I've read some of them and they're beautiful books, but I have to know how they've changed based on the love scene or the argument or the reveal or having breakfast together or talking to their best friend. I have to know where their feelings are at the end of the scene so that I can keep stomping on them until they give in to me. What is your weak point? Let me push on that.
Stomp, stomp, stomp.
Oh, you shouldn't have told me.
What's the rest of your process kind of look like as you're going? Are you a daily writer, or do you keep word counts or anything like that?
I feel like that's when I do my best, is when I'm a daily writer. When I get to where I can almost see the end, or where I get to when I feel like I have about 10% left, it's the only thing I can think about, and it tends to come out in a big stream. Usually because I'm desperate, because I'm way past a deadline and I really have to get it done. That does help. I have a critique group that I love, and we usually meet monthly. We can meet more if people need it, because all of us are published, and it's half my income, and for the other woman, she just recently retired, so it's all of her income. And so we're all very not prolific, but we write as fast as we can. And I like to talk to other people who I sometimes exchange pages with. They're very helpful, especially if they can give me feedback right there and say, yes, this is the right direction, or no, I don't believe in this for this character. But I definitely think that I'm better when I write every day, because I'm able to stay more true to who the character was, and it doesn't feel like, I don't worry so much that I'm like, did I completely change personalities halfway through this book because I haven't worked on it in 6 months because I had to get something else done. So I'm very linear in that way, and I do like to have a word count. I'm very excited about writing a noveler, because they just added this goals feature, and you get little coach words down at the bottom where they're like, oh, good, go you wrote how many words? And when you hit your goal, it's very exciting, and I need validation. It's lonely. It's good to have validation. It's just me and my imaginary friends, and sometimes we wonder if we're actually doing this right.
So you've hinted around a little bit at that there's a new Baltimore book kind of in the offing. What all are you planning to get out to the readers in 2019?
In 2019, it would be nice if I could get that Baltimore book out. I would also like to send something to Karina. I have just the most vague impression of something with, actually, that's just a list of tropes at the moment. I don't even have a character to beat over the head with them. So I have no idea. And then I have I have so many things I want to write. So I don't know what 2019 will hold. I do know that someone, and I can't really talk about it because it's my other pen name, but that's going to definitely have another book out, and hopefully my mom's not listening to the podcast. She's not allowed to know about that pen name.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
Well, don't tell Mom you're on.
Readers can know about Sim Forrester, but we aren't going to tell my mom about this podcast, so that She doesn't know about Sim Forrester. Sim Forrester does not guarantee a happy ending, but eventually they'll get one.
That's
That's
okay.
why she has a
Not everybody,
ending.
unfortunately, can have a happy forever after.
Well, they get their happy ever after. It's just a lot more sex before they get it, and they're when I write romance, when they meet each other, that's it. They're not going to look at anybody else with any serious intent. So and that's not the way it goes in my erotica. So it's definitely much more of a sexual journey, the Sin books. So the third book in her series will definitely be out soon. I'm almost done with it.
That's very cool, having the
Yeah,
alternate
it's
pen
like I
name.
said, it's not a secret. I don't mind. I just created 2 pen names so that readers would get the KA experience they expect without having to worry about it if it was it's just a different flavor. It's like Diet Coke and Diet Cherry Coke.
Yeah, yeah. It sets the right expectations.
Yes.
Now, we talked ever so briefly earlier on that you also teach writing.
Yes,
And
I love to do workshops on writing. I have one on love scenes that I do that I love sharing because I feel like it's the thing that people use to put romance down to, it's just about sex and to me, it's like if you were going to write a book about you wouldn't say to a thriller author, let's just skip all that stuff where we're finding out who the bad guy is and just, I just want to look at something else. People don't treat other genre fiction the same way they treat romance, and I like to reinforce how important love scenes are. And they don't have to be sex scenes, but they do have to be intimate emotionally, and sometimes that comes through physically, but they have to be aware of each other in an intimate way. And I like teaching that one. And I also I make use a lot of enneagrams as starting points for my characters, and I have a workshop on that.
what is an Enneagram for those who may not know?
An enneagram is I think of it in terms of like it's about as reliable a personality predictor as an astrology, but they put people into 9 different categories of behavior, and then you're affected by your wings, which are the personalities on either side of you, and then you connect across the circle of 9 with what they call stress and security points. So it's a really good blueprint. I don't write to it like where, oh, I can't give him that because he's a this, but I like having that as a framework to build my character on.
How did you get into the teaching of writing? You mentioned you had your teaching certificate and taught for quite a while. Was it just a natural progression?
Yes, I love teaching. One of the first stories that I fell in love with was Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which I read when I was 11 or 12. And one of the things that this book is about loving people through teaching and sharing what you love with other people and how powerful that is. And I really enjoyed teaching when I could connect with my students and have them fall in love with literature, have them fall in love with story, and learn to understand that books aren't these dusty things that you have to do a book report on, but that there are stories out there that will speak to you. We just have to find what they are. And I actually missed that when I quit to write full time during the heyday of everybody was getting a Kindle, and my January sales were always like, woo, I love it. But now I still love it. I'm teaching, I'm tutoring, and it's basically like teaching without lesson plans or correcting or having to usually have to fill out paperwork. So I was teaching at a school that got a little violent, so I had to leave that. And now the students have to pay to come to school, so most of the time they're not violent.
I would hope not. You don't want to.
But I do love the activity of teaching. I love sharing. And as you and I were saying, we could talk fiction and genre and books forever, and it's just fun to talk to other writers. And I always learn something when I do a workshop because other people have different ways of looking at things, and I'm like, oh.
Do you find that keeps you constantly updating kind of what you're teaching because you keep picking up things along the way?
Absolutely. Every time I do a presentation on writing, I add and I change. And when I first started doing it, I would, I had handouts and I would talk, and now I use PowerPoints, and I've incorporated things that I keep learning because I keep learning from other writers. Anytime I go to a workshop at a writing conference, I always pick up something that is going to make my work better. And I hope I use it, but I love learning about different ways to think about. It's always the same story because it's all about, the character and the character's arc and the romantic arc. But some people just have a way of saying it that it clicks in your head and you're like, oh, I get it now. Some people just have a way of putting it. It doesn't necessarily mean that other people weren't great teachers. This person just said it in a way that connects in your head.
Yeah, exactly. Well, K.A., it has been awesome talking with you. And as we wrap up, tell everybody the best ways that they can keep up with you online to keep up with what you're getting ready to release over the course of the year.
My newsletter is the best way because anytime I have something come out, I put it in my newsletter. Newsletter subscribers tend to get things first as far as an excerpt. I always try and give them something exclusive just for the newsletter. But if you want to know what precious little gems are falling out of my brain every day, I'm most often on Twitter at KA_Mitchell. And I've just started on Instagram. Facebook terrifies me. I go on and I feel so awkward, so I throw up promo and run away. It's just not my thing. But I do try and participate in what they call One Line Wednesday on Twitter every Wednesday, and that's where they give you the Kiss of Death RWA chapter offers up a theme, and everybody posts a line from their work in progress. And that's a lot of fun for me to find something that matches the theme. So I try and post that all of the time. So if you're interested in what I'm working on, that's a great thing. You can just follow the hashtag and you can see a lot of other authors' ideas, or you can just follow me and the hashtag, and then you won't have to wade through a lot of tweets.
Well, fantastic. We will link up to all of these things that we've talked about in our show notes so that folks can find them.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to hang out with us for a little bit.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was so much fun.